First, I want to thank Frank Smith. I want to thank for having us here. Yes, let's hear it for Frank. Yeah, this occasion is fraught with symbolism, and this museum is part of that. When I first came to Congress, and Frank was on the D.C. City Council, he wanted a memorial to African Americans who died in the Civil War. It became one of my very first bills. It was not difficult to get through, but this museum was not part of it. Frank, then sitting on the City Council, got the City Council to come forward with the funds that built this museum so that when people come to the memorial to the 200,000 African Americans who fought and died in the Civil War, they will have a museum to come to. So Frank, I can't thank you enough for how you have grown and maintained and created this museum. The symbolism keeps coming. Today, there were 2 war votes in the House of Representatives. There was a vote to block funds for any war in Iran, and there was a second vote to repeal the authorization for military force in Iraq. That goes back to 2002. It's been used by presidents ever since, including Democratic presidents, to enter into any war they would like. There was nobody there to vote for the District of Columbia, although matters of war and peace are perhaps first and foremost what every member of Congress should be able to vote for. The symbolism of this place that we have chosen to come to make an important announcement today is in memory, and our remarks will be in memory of the 200,000 African Americans. 3 out of 4 of them were slaves. As they escaped slavery, they were able to join the war and to add to the troops that won the Civil War. They are deserving of the memorial across the street in their honor. I want to especially thank my good friend, the chair of the committee that will hear this matter, H.R. 51, and will mark up the bill. I want to thank Chairwoman Maloney for doing even more than that. I approached her and asked my good friend Carolyn if the markup and vote could be held on February 11th, again to continue the symbolism that is so important to this historic occasion. We wanted February 11th because both Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass were born in February. Lincoln freed D.C. slaves ahead of the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed other slaves in the United States, and that was because of the special jurisdiction of the federal government over the District of Columbia. So that's one occasion, I guess, when being under jurisdiction under federal jurisdiction worked in our favor. I'm particularly grateful because my own great-grandfather was a runaway slave in the District of Columbia at the time. Of course, since he was a runaway slave, he couldn't be easily freed. He had freed himself. This Lincoln's proclamation freed the slaves who were owned in the District of Columbia. But this date in February is important to us for another reason as well. It is because Frederick Douglass was a long-time resident of this city and was the first prominent American to make it his business to over and over again argue for full and equal status for the people who lived in the District of Columbia. That is why we have named our bill Washington Douglass Commonwealth. Today, I ask that we all recall that the Revolutionary War, which resulted in the establishment of the United States of America, had as its war slogan, "No taxation without representation." What the framers fought for has been achieved everywhere in the United States except in our own nation's capital. We announced today that on February the 11th, the House Oversight and Reform Committee will mark up and vote to send to the floor H.R. 51 to give the residents of the District of Columbia equal representation with the states in both houses of Congress, and to ensure that Congress can never again interfere into the governing affairs of the district or dictate or change the district's local laws. On September 19th, the House Oversight Committee, under Chairwoman Maloney, held the requisite hearing with D.C. government officials and residents. This hearing definitively showed that H.R. 1 is constitutional. The new state, which contributes more as I speak in federal taxes than 22 current states do today, would be fully able to support itself. The taxation without representation slogan understates the unique denial of equal rights for the residents of the district. Not only do D.C. rights pay federal taxes like other Americans, our residents pay more in federal taxes than other Americans. In fact, the highest federal taxes per capita in the United States. D.C. residents have served, fought, and died in every one of our country's wars, including the Revolutionary War, which gave birth to the nation itself. Right now, as I speak, nearly 30,000 veterans live in the district after serving to defend their country without the same rights as other members of the military. Nor would the new state of Washington, D.C., Washington Douglass Commonwealth, be the smallest in population. The new state, with more than 700,000 residents, has a population greater than that of two states, Vermont and Wyoming, which have always enjoyed equal rights with the largest states in the Union. I had no sooner gotten to Congress when I was able to get the district's first ever floor vote on statehood. Because during most of my service in the House, Republicans have been in the majority, I have had no clear shot for statehood until now. Today, I am so sure that the House will pass H.R. 51 that I am already working in the Senate with the help of senators and more than 100 national organizations who have had success in getting difficult bills passed in the Senate. The district will be more than halfway home when the House votes to pass H.R. 51 this very year, 2020. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask the chairwoman who will preside on September the 11th at our markup that is necessary before this bill goes to the floor, Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney, to come forward and offer her remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is a great honor for me to be at this historic site with this historic, truly historic announcement. And I first would like to thank my dear friend and colleague, Eleanor Holmes Norton, for her tireless advocacy on behalf of the District of Columbia. And believe me, she works on it every day, talking about it, gathering co-sponsors, pushing to the issue forward. She has been a true heroine for the people she represents. I also want to thank Mayor Bowser, who testified with great eloquence and meaning before the United States Congress on behalf of this bill, and Council Chairman Mendelson for their leadership and support. Today, we are announcing a markup of the D.C. Statehood bill and the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, which I chair, on February 11th, a historic day. Frederick Douglass and Lincoln. This will be the first markup of the D.C. Statehood bill in Congress since 1993, the last time that Eleanor Holmes Norton brought it to the floor for a vote. The United States is a democracy, but its capital is not. More than 700,000 D.C. residents are taxed without voting representation in Congress. They cannot consent to federal laws that govern them, and they pay more in federal taxes than 22 states. D.C. residents have been petitioning for congressional voting rights and local self-government for more than 200 years, and in 2016, 86% of D.C. residents voted for statehood. Yet neither chamber of Congress has ever passed the D.C. statehood bill on the floor. But I believe and I hope that this year will be different. We will pass it in the House of Representatives. I am proud to be a co-sponsor, an original co-sponsor, as I have the entire time I've been in Congress, of H.R. 51, because this legislation now has a record number of co-sponsors, over 224, more than you need to pass it in the House of Representatives. And that is a great achievement. We're going to the floor with great strength, thanks to Eleanor's work. I truly believe that a commitment to democracy should transcend party affiliation. Let me give you just one example. In 2007, when Vice President Mike Pence was a member of Congress, he made this very eloquent statement that I agree with completely, and I quote, "The fact that more than 500,000 Americans living in the District of Columbia are denied a single voting representative in Congress is clearly a historic wrong. The single overreaching principle of the American founding was that laws should be based upon the consent of the governed. Given their commitment to representative democracy, it is inconceivable to me that our founders would have been willing to accept the denial of representation to so great a throng of Americans in perpetuity." I end quote. And I could not agree more with his statement. This is soundly a bipartisan issue. I want to close by again commending Congresswoman Norton for her historic and deep and committed work on this. Her leadership has brought us to this moment, and we will continue to carry on forward until we achieve what is historically correct and right for a democracy. I am committed to working with her till we pass this and make D.C. a state. Thank you. I would now, you're going to introduce Scott.
Thank you, Chairwoman Maloney. It's in your hands now, your very capable hands on February the 11th. Our next speaker is a woman whose title we want to change to Governor of Washington Commonwealth. 219 years ago, the District of Columbia was formed. This is a historic moment, and the way to show it is to have a governor rather than a mayor.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am very honored to be here and join my Congresswoman, our Congresswoman, and our warrior on the Hill, Eleanor Holmes Norton. Give her another big round of applause. I am really delighted that our Chairwoman of Government Oversight has joined us here in War I at our African American Civil War Museum. Let's welcome Congresswoman Maloney. Give her a big DC welcome. But let's also, and I know she knows this, but we'll just reinforce it and let you know that 700,000 people are behind Eleanor Holmes Norton each and every day. And I mean that almost literally, because she gets like 98% of the vote each and every time. And that's because she's earned it. She's earned it with her work on statehood for sure. But all of the things that she accomplishes for us without having a vote are truly remarkable. Taking back federal land and ensuring that that land becomes housing and jobs for DC residents. Focusing on DC veterans to make sure that they have every benefit that they deserve. Making sure the National Park Service does what it's supposed to do in DC for DC residents. These are the types of things that she has been able to accomplish for us and help to make us the greatest city in the world, and soon to be the 51st state. We are grateful for you, Congresswoman. I am also delighted that we are here with Phil Mendelson, who chairs our state legislature, Congresswoman, and the Council of the District of Columbia is exceptional in the work that it does, translating the will of the people of the District of Columbia into law. As I was listening to Eleanor and to Congresswoman Maloney, I was just reminded of how proud I am of House Democrats. They promised that they would be for the people. And they have demonstrated that they are for the people, especially us people here in Washington, D.C. The oversight hearing, the hearing that we attended and represented the district on H.R. 51 was a long time in coming, and House Democrats showed up knowledgeable about our issue and ready to fight. And we so appreciate that. The House Democrats said they would be for the people and doing all the things that are right. And that's what I think that we have seen in all of their presentations this week at the Senate, that they're going to stand up for our republic and do what is right. And what is right is that 700,000 people have 2 senators and their congresswoman gets a vote. That's right. And that is what our country is all about. I am grateful that the chairwoman knows the work ahead and the road ahead and has everything, every tool she needs to get it done. But you should also know it's 700,000 of us who will be right there with you. So on February the 11th, there's a markup. Are you going to show up? Yeah. Are you going to speak up? Yeah. Are you going to be about DC statehood? Because we want to let the Congress know that we're not begging, we're not beggars. We demand statehood for Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser, soon to become our governor. I do want to indicate that February 11th is likely to be like our session where we had our hearing. At that time, not only were all the seats filled, but many people couldn't get in. And I want to thank DC Vote for putting a big screen out in front so that people could see it because you couldn't get into the hearing room. Stand up. Now, Council Chair Mendelson, I'm not sure what it is, how you want to be called, but you just tell us how you want to be called when we become the 51st state, and we'll see that that happens. Council Chairman Phil Mendelson.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I, at the moment, can't remember what we put in the bill with regard to what the title is, but you can call me Phil. So, Eleanor, you began speaking, talking about symbolism, and I look around this museum, and what I see was that this was a fight for citizenship. And the Civil War ended with constitutional amendments that granted citizenship to African Americans, the former slaves. And that's what our fight is about here, is about full citizenship. That it's not good enough to be citizens of the United States, which we are when we are not full citizens with all the rights and the privileges, all of the rights and the privileges. We pay more taxes per capita. We send our children off to war and they die. We do everything that we're asked of by the federal government, but we do not have that fundamental right. The fundamental right that our founding fathers fought for, which is the right to vote and the right to full representation. So I see that citizenship in this room. You know, in January 2017, I went to Mexico City. Some people wonder why I bring that up. Mexico, when it had its revolution, organized its government similar to the way the United States is organized and had a federal district, which was their national capital, Mexico City. But somehow in the last decade, they've figured out how to give it full citizenship, statehood, give it statehood. And now Mexico City is not just the federal, is not the federal district, it is the state of Mexico City. And that's what we ask, is that we are the state, the state of Washington Douglas Commonwealth. I was thinking, what is the value? I want to just talk for a moment. What is the value of statehood for us from the perspective of the council, the legislature? Well, legislative autonomy. Right now, as many of you know, every bill we pass has to go up to the Congress. If it involves the criminal code, it goes up for 60 days. But there's some things that we're not allowed to legislate on. Somebody was talking to me the other day about a proposal to amend what the rules are regarding jury service. Who can serve on juries? Who can serve on juries? Citizens. And we can't amend the rules because we're prohibited from doing that. That's left to the courts. We cannot amend the section of the code that deals with the courts. Recently, I've been looking at a development mechanism that actually Mayor Bowser was very interested in, has been very interested in, that's public-private partnerships. And what can we do to be helping with our infrastructure through public-private partnerships? We're limited because apparently the way congressional restrictions are on us through the Home Rule Act, we cannot do the financing mechanism that comes with public-private partnerships without an act of Congress. We could do that if we were a state. Or budget autonomy. So a few years ago, we amended the Home Rule Act. We had to go to court to sue, and we have budget autonomy according to the courts. But Congress does not fully respect that, and every year they insist on passing an appropriation. It's a costly process. It actually is a reason why our credit rating on Wall Street is not higher, because we do not have statehood, and because our appropriation, Congress still says our appropriation has to come through them. We would save money. We would have a better financial situation if we had statehood. So these are real ways that this legislation will make a difference in terms of legislation, in terms of public financing that will benefit all residents. I didn't mean to stand up here and give a school talk. I apologize for that, but this really is an important milestone. I want to thank Chairwoman Maloney for your commitment in moving forward with this legislation and echo what Mayor Bowser said in thanking our warrior on the Hill, because nobody has been fighting harder for us than Eleanor Holmes Norton. Thank you.
On the contrary, perhaps we'll call you majority leader, I don't know, since whole council is in the majority. I appreciate your remarks because they brought out some of the practical reasons that are a little below the surface why statehood is so important to us. If you have any questions for any of our guests, please let me know.
I'm reporter. My name's Sophie. I'm with the Washington Times. House Republicans are still making.
Can we stand up?
I can stand up. Yeah.
Yes.
House Republicans are still making Jack Evans an issue when it comes to statehood. They requested that you invite him for an under oath interview. Do you plan to do that? And what's your reaction?
We've already invited him. We have responded to the demands of the Republicans' request many, many times, both in person and in writing. I'm constantly responding in writing, and I'll be glad to give you a copy of all of our correspondence. As we have explained, we held our hearing on WMATA already. That's what they want the hearing on. We had it. And we are now awaiting the results of an IG, an Inspector General investigation. So let's wait for those results. And this was, and we need to get that result before we get to any other future negotiations or discussions. Mr. Evans has been since resigned from his position. He's no longer in the position, and we did invite him. It's not my responsibility to get all of their witnesses. When I want a witness at a hearing, I work to get the witness there. We sent him an invitation. We gave him a phone call. If they wanted to get him there, he didn't show up. But, we did have the hearing. They wanted a hearing. He didn't show up. So we've responded to every single thing that they have talked about. And contrary to the Republicans' letter, their minority day of hearings, we held it. They wrote me right when I got elected. They wanted a minority day of hearings. We gave them a date. We had the hearing. And the fact that Mr. Evans didn't show up, they want to have another one. That's not the way it works. When you have a hearing, you have a hearing. They were noticed appropriately. They gave us a list of people they wanted to be there. They were all invited. And we have fulfilled our responsibility. Any other questions? Okay. Any other questions? But I think it would. Pardon, any other questions? Thank you.
I appreciate what you had to say about Jack Evans. The most important thing is they're relevant to the statehood hearing. Are there any other questions for any of us? Thank you very much for coming.